What if I told you that the deadliest pandemic in history spared no one, kings, peasants, saints, or sinners? That in just 5 years, half of Europe was wiped out, and the only cure doctors offered was bloodletting and prayers? This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a test of survival. Most failed, but some lived. Why? What did they know that others didn't? What secrets kept them breathing while the world around them choked on its own blood? This isn't just the story of the Black Death. This is the story of how you might have survived it. If you think modern medicine would have saved you, think again. Because in 1347, survival wasn't about luck, it was about strategy. And the first rule? Run. The Black Death moved through 14th century Europe like a silent predator, striking without warning and killing with terrifying efficiency. This wasn't just a disease, it was a relentless force of nature that reshaped civilizations. To survive it, you needed to understand its cruel mechanisms. The plague came in 3 distinct forms, each more horrifying than the last. The most common was the bubonic variety, transmitted through something as innocuous as a flea bite. You didn't need direct contact with rats. Simply walking through an infested market or sleeping on a flea-ridden mattress could seal your fate. Within 3 days, victims would develop grotesque, egg-sized boils called buboes in their lymph nodes, typically in the groin, armpits, or neck. As the infection spread, skin would blacken from tissue death, while raging fevers cooked victims alive in their own bodies. The suffering was unimaginable. Some in their delirium would burst their own boils in agony, only to hasten their demise. For those who contracted this form, the survival window was brutally short, 4 to 7 days of torment before death claimed most victims. Only the rare few whose bodies mounted an extraordinary defense might survive, left with horrific scars as permanent reminders of their brush with death. Far more deadly was the pneumonic form, which turned something as simple as human breath into a weapon. Unlike its bubonic cousin, this version needed no flea vectors. A single cough in a crowded room could doom dozens. The bacteria attacked the lungs with terrifying speed, filling them with thick, bloody foam until victims literally drowned in their own fluids. Death often came within 24 hours, leaving no time for treatment or goodbyes. Against this airborne killer, your only hope was complete isolation, to never breathe the same air as another human being again. Most terrifying of all was the septicemic plague, which moved through the bloodstream like a shadow. There were no warning buboes, no telltale coughs, just sudden, violent fever followed by blackened skin and catastrophic organ failure. Some victims dropped dead before they even realized they were sick, their bodies turning against them in a matter of hours. For those struck by this version, there was no survival window. Infection meant certain, instantaneous death. The plague moved like a shadow, silent, inevitable, but it had one weakness. It needed bodies to spread. The survivors knew this, and their first move? Get out. When the plague hit Messina in 1347, the smartest citizens fled to the countryside within hours of the first death. In Venice, wealthy merchants abandoned their homes, retreating to isolated villas. Some even took to the sea, living on ships until the worst passed. The rule was simple. If you stayed in the city, you died. If you left fast enough, you had a chance. But where to go, and how to stay safe once you got there? Escaping the plague wasn't enough. You had to stay clean, avoid crowds. Markets, churches, even family gatherings were death traps. Burn the dead immediately. Survivors in Milan sealed infected houses shut, burning them with the bodies inside. Harsh? Yes. Effective? Absolutely. Wash everything. Though germ theory didn't exist, some noticed that filth spread disease. The smartest survivors washed clothes in vinegar and avoided contact with strangers. When the Black Death swept across Europe, medieval medicine proved utterly powerless against it. Doctors armed with ancient theories and superstitions only made things worse, their so-called cures often hastening death rather than preventing it. The standard treatment of bloodletting, draining a patient's vital fluids to rebalance the 4 humors, left already weakened plague victims with no chance of survival. People clung to desperate measures, wearing magical amulets and drinking crushed gemstones, while the wealthy smothered themselves in mercury or purchased fragments of saints' bones as divine protection. None of it worked. Even the iconic plague doctors with their beaked masks filled with herbs, while terrifying to behold, did nothing to stop the actual disease, though their waxed leather robes may have accidentally provided some protection against flea bites. In their panic, some communities resorted to horrific extremes, burning alive those suspected of carrying the plague, or massacring minority groups blamed for spreading it. These brutal acts revealed how fear could warp human morality, turning neighbors against each other in a frenzy of self-destruction. Yet, amidst all this madness, one approach actually showed results: the radical concept of isolation. The city of Ragusa pioneered the first formal quarantine in 1377, forcing incoming travelers to wait 30 days on offshore islands before allowing them entry. Venice later expanded this to 40 days, a period that often meant the difference between life and death for a city's population. This simple act of separation, born from observation rather than medical theory, proved more effective than all the leeches and prayers combined. The tragic lesson of the Black Death was that humanity's first instincts in the face of the unknown often prove fatal. For every life saved by quarantine, thousands perished due to superstition and panic. Yet this colossal failure forced European medicine to begin questioning ancient dogmas, planting the seeds for a more scientific approach that would eventually transform our understanding of disease. The plague doctors with their useless herbs and the priests selling worthless relics became symbols of an era when medicine was more art than science, while the quiet success of quarantine pointed toward a future where observation and evidence would triumph over tradition and fear. In the end, the Black Death didn't just kill millions, it exposed the limitations of medieval thinking and set in motion a medical revolution that would change the world. The Black Death unleashed more than just a biological catastrophe. It triggered a psychological breakdown that proved just as deadly as the disease itself. As corpses piled up in the streets and entire neighborhoods fell silent, human reason began to unravel under the weight of collective terror. Some sought salvation through extreme fanaticism, like the flagellants who marched from town to town, their ritual self-whipping, creating open wounds that ironically made them perfect plague carriers. Others surrendered to paranoia, scapegoating Jews, foreigners, and supposed witches in pogroms that turned cities into slaughterhouses, the very violence and displacement often accelerating the plague's spread rather than stopping it. Yet amid this descent into madness, a minority managed to keep their wits about them. These survivors recognized that fear itself had become a secondary contagion, as dangerous as the bacteria coursing through their cities. They understood that hysterical crowds gathering for protection actually created ideal conditions for transmission, that rumors spread faster than facts, and that superstition blinded people to practical solutions. While others clutched at magical cures or divine intervention, these clear-eyed individuals relied on cold observation, noticing, for instance, that those who isolated early tended to survive longer, or that certain neighborhoods with better sanitation suffered fewer deaths. Their greatest weapon wasn't medicine or divine favor, but the ability to maintain reason when the world was losing its mind. In an age when even educated men believed the plague was caused by bad air or planetary alignments, this psychological resilience, the capacity to see clearly and act deliberately, marked the difference between those who buried their families and those who lived to rebuild. When the plague finally faded, the survivors emerged to a changed world. Labor was now valuable. Peasants could demand better wages. Cities rebuilt smarter, wider streets, better sanitation. Medicine evolved. The failure of old cures pushed science forward. But the biggest lesson? The next pandemic is coming. Will we be the ones who run, adapt, and survive? Or will we repeat the mistakes of the past? The plague's warning. The Black Death wasn't just history, it was a dress rehearsal. COVID-19 proved that pandemics never truly end, they just wait. The survivors of 1347 didn't have science, they didn't have vaccines, but they had instinct, discipline, the will to live. And that might be the only thing that saves us next time, because the plague taught us one thing: when death comes, the smartest don't pray, they act.